Welcome back, Reconcile. Pastor Kevin here with our series, Foundations Revisited, where we're going back looking at our core convictions, the big values that kind of drive what we do as a church, and kind of unpacking why we believe these things. So, if you've been with us for the past few weeks, we're 4 weeks into it now. Week 1, we looked at our name. We Reconciled Church. We said reconciled looks to two different things about us: our identity, who we are as reconciled sinners to God, and also our mission as those calling people to be reconciled to God through faith in Jesus Christ. And then in week 2, we looked at our first core conviction, and we said that the gospel is the power to save sinners and change lives. Basically, it's like fuel that drives a car, or coal that stokes an engine, if you like train analogies a little bit more. Last week, we looked at the church and explained that the church is a picture of life in God's kingdom. When people want to know how God intends life to be lived, they should be able to look at the church and see that. They should see Christians treating each other the way God has called us to treat each other, loving our neighbor, loving God with all our heart, and as a result, they see a clearer picture of what life in God's kingdom is supposed to be. This week, we're moving away from our communal behavior and into our personal behavior. And we're looking at our faith personally and how growth in holiness and the knowledge of God affects what we do. So here's this week's point. Here's this week's core conviction. Our changed lives give proof to our message. So let's talk about that. One of the great objections to the faith, perhaps one that's even somewhat valid, is that why should someone choose to be a Christian if Christians are just indistinguishable from everyone else in the world around them, even those who have no faith? So if being a Christian doesn't actually change you, why on earth should your neighbor become a Christian? Author Brendan Manning summarized this idea really well when he made this statement. He said, "The single greatest cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips, walk out the door, and deny him by their lifestyle. This is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable." Okay, this is a great point. What he's saying is, one of the big reasons people don't believe in God is because there's no proof, there's no evidence in your life that God has actually changed you. James raises the same issue in his letter when he writes in chapter 1, verse 14, "What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, be warm and be filled,' without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead." Strong words here, guys. Now, James is not saying, look, you earn your salvation by your works. Rather, what he's saying is that true saving faith always manifests itself in good works, okay, or good deeds. If you actually have true biblical saving faith, you're going to show it in love for God and love for your neighbor. Now, we believe that one of the greatest ways to extinguish arguments and objections people have to the faith is by showing our faith through the way we interact with people. See, living by faith, therefore, is an apologetic. It's its own best defense against Christianity's critics. Okay, so Christians call this type of growth, this type of maturity in the faith, sanctification. It means to be set apart or to be made holy. More and more in life, we believe, as we trust in Jesus, as we follow Jesus, we are becoming more like Jesus. We are growing in our faith. We are growing to become more and more like the man we were intended to be. So, the Apostle Peter suggested that our changed lives raise questions amongst unbelievers about where our hope is found. 1 Peter chapter 3, he says, "But in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame." So according to Peter, when people see the hope that you have in Jesus and they see it actually lived out, the question they're going to ask is why. Why don't you lose your temper like others do? Why don't you try to repay someone when they do you wrong? Well, when you've been wronged by someone, why don't you seek to repay them for this, to make them pay? Or why don't you seem afraid of death? All these are good questions, and all these things are unusual. They're a little weird. They're countercultural. They go against the way people seem to be living their lives. Therefore, one of the greatest ways to show the world what you really believe is by the way you live your life, is by living a life that shows that God has actually changed you. Okay? One last thing on this, something that's important to understand is that God works on changing you from where you are. So one of the big things people get caught up in is we have a tendency to compare ourselves with each other. And so we go, I'm just not as good as so-and-so. I'm not as righteous a person as so-and-so. Well, maybe so, but that's not really the point. See, none of us measure up to God's standard. God expects perfect righteousness from us. And the only reason we are brought into God's family, God's kingdom, is through the gospel, through Jesus Christ's righteous life in our place. Okay? That's how God sees us. He's not comparing us with the next guy. He's not saying just be better than your neighbor at doing these things and you'll be fine. We are all sinners saved by grace. However, it's important to understand that we all, if we have true faith, will see change in our lives. Okay? And as the people around you, as your family, as your friends, the people who knew who you were before you were a Christian, or the people that you've known for some time now, see growth and maturity of faith in you, what happens is it raises those questions. You don't seem the same. There's something different about you. What's up with that? And so as a result of that, what happens is this presents opportunities for you to share your faith. Now, so what do you do with this? Don't worry about where you're starting from. Just get started following Jesus. Give it enough time, people around you will notice the growth, and they're going to ask questions. Now, when they do ask those questions, what do you say? Glad you asked. That's what we'll talk about next week. So, guys, hope this has been helpful. Have a great week, and I'll see you soon.